So, I have something to tell you. Okay? So, remember how when we were kids and you would tell us about how you went into World War II at the age of 14?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah?
Yes.
You went to, what, France, I think? Well, you always wanted to have your story told. So I'm going to try to tell it for you, okay? Okay? And sometimes I know that, like, sometimes sometimes you have those bad dreams and stuff still. And, I just want to let people know about that too, because other people do too. And they could really help. Could really help other people who go through the same thing that you go through.
Yeah, that all really, that all.
No, it wasn't a dream. Well, it wasn't all a dream. I mean, you went through it. People need to hear your story and what a great person you are. And what a great man you've been, not only to your family, but to your country. To your country. Since the age of 14, you've been a great man to your country, and we appreciate it. Thank you. I'm gonna put some ice in this, okay? My dad's DD214. It's like, man, you kind of learn what that number is. It's kind of one of those things like you just need it for everything. And so this is, yeah, we had a walk to fight the mental illness stigma, and my company helped produce it. We volunteered and provided music and provided entertainment. We had a flash mob. We had got some speakers to come in. In March 2013, Pueblo, Colorado did this thing where they honored my dad. They called it Herbert P. Jr. Day, March 23rd, 2013. It was signed by all of the commissioners. This is the original manuscript. This life story, he writes, this is the preface to my dad's. This life story I wish to tell covers the period in the U.S. Army from April 25th, 1942 to June 16th, 1945. I was under the required age of 18 years old during this period. I would include many war experiences from the battlefield of France and Germany, as well as the experiences before reaching the required 18 years of age. My dad had come to me and he had wrote this book, this memoir, and that memoir was about his life, and mainly his life during World War II, I guess. I remember my senior year in high school, my dad coming and giving each and every one of us kids a handout of like this short little book that he wrote about his experience in World War II. The other interesting thing was that my parents were getting divorced at that time. Because they were getting divorced, I think that my dad kind of just wanted us to kind of say like, well, this is why things got so crazy. This is why I am the way I am. When my dad wrote that memoir, I remember just kind of, I was a senior in high school and I just kind of took that and just kind of shoved it into this bag and never really read it anymore, and well, actually, I don't think I read it the first time. And it sat with my things of, things that my parents had given me that I just kind of kept. And then eventually my dad kept on, he's like, oh, I want you to tell my story. I want you to tell my story. And I was like, all right, I will. After my parents had got divorced. And what happened was that we had a bunch of family friends, or a couple of family friends, and also some family members who had been in the military and had suffered from PTS. I remember that they had become suicidal. And I just remember feeling like I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to help, how to be there. And then I remember going back to my dad and just saying, knowing that my dad had struggled himself and had went through bouts of alcoholism, due to his PTS, and because back then it wasn't really diagnosed. And I know that he went to therapy, he went to his parish priest and all these things, and was constantly, fighting that
battle, and I was like, Dad, at that point he was getting up in age and his health was starting to fail him, and I kind of felt like, well, let's tell the story, but let's tell the whole story.
In the hot summer months of 1941, the United States Army was all over the South playing war games in preparation for World War II. Me and the other local boys played our war games using sticks for rifles and a small lake. Black Lake made a good campground. The weather was hot and humid. The sky was beautiful and vegetation at its peak. We marched and swam day after day, playing soldiers and cooking whatever we could find to eat. It made the camp seem like the real thing, like we were real soldiers.
My name's Stephen Butterman. I joined the U.S. Army, and I joined the U.S. Army Infantry. Joined them in 2010. Went to basic in January, graduated in May, and then by August I was in Afghanistan. I went to military school. I was kind of obsessed with just the military in general for a while, and always fascinated by military history. Always a big history buff, and I wanted to be part of something bigger than myself, and I guess kind of prove who I was as a man. And I figured the Army was a good way to do that. I was serving with the 101st Airborne Division, 2nd of the 506. Pretty prestigious unit. It was kind of cool for me because I was always a fan of military history growing up. So I used to read Stephen Ambrose's books, like Band of Brothers and that kind of stuff. And Band of Brothers was all based on the 2nd of the 506 back in World War II. And so we had about a month and a half of training and then straight in country.
My name is Paul David Schupert. Most of my childhood, I remember, I want to be a Marine. I want to be a Marine. There was like one year where I really thought I was going to be like a professional baseball player. Then the next year, I was like, I'm going to go back to wanting to be a Marine. I joined 2009, roughly 6 months after I got out of high school. I knew that's what I wanted. I did JROTC, father being in the Marine Corps, watching all the Marine Corps movies, documentaries, stuff like that. So you go to boot camp, and then for boot camp you go to what some people call your A school. For me it was SOI, School of Infantry. I had, I think, about a week off from boot camp to SOI. So I went home, chilled out. I did a couple things with a recruiter, because it's kind of common, you get back, you go talk to your recruiter shows you off trying to get new people to join up. So after that, that's when I got transferred to my unit there in Lejeune 19. That was the unit I ended up deploying with. So I had about a year with them, training. They had just came back from a deployment, I think maybe 2 or 3 months prior to me getting there. A lot of guys, they PCS'd out, so they were also pretty short-staffed. So we were kind of like in the immediate downtime from a deployment. That's where anyone that is getting out goes to get out. We get some new guys, and we spend some time training, and then we deploy again. I was there for just under 2 months. We were originally slated to be there for 9 months.
This is the pantry weapon. Because everybody, you know, when they're getting food, needs one of these.
Why do you keep that in your pantry?
Well, you know, someone wants to try and take your rice or your bottle of water. I don't know, because I'm running out of fucking room to put guns places. That's why. There's goddamn many of them. My death wish. You want me to talk about my death wish? My desire to end my life through military service. Yeah, I definitely signed up to get some action and got plenty of that. I was lucky enough to have a recruiter that did not lie to me when he heard what I wanted to do, which was go into the airborne infantry. It was inspired by a neighbor's father down the street. He said no. He said, I'm not going to let you. He says, until you let me explain to you what this is all about. And so for a few different weekends, we went out kind of in the woods, you know, shooting and camping and hiking and humping and stuff like this. And this old man beat my ass out there. I mean, I couldn't believe it. I was 19 years old and I'm having trouble keeping up with this guy who was wounded in Vietnam. He had part of his hip missing. At the end of it all, he says, you know, you're signing on to be cold, wet, tired, hungry, and pissed off all the time. He goes, why do you want to do this? And I said, well, because I don't know any better.
December 7th, 1941. No American will ever forget this Sunday morning in Hawaii. A surprise attack.
Only a month after the bombing of Pearl Harbor had I made up my mind about becoming a soldier. I went down to the local board office and told the ladies I wanted to sign up for the Army.
From Pearl Harbor, a sinister plume of heavy smoke rises skyward. War's finger on America's Gibraltar. United States pilots continue the chase. In the distance, guns roar, and billowing smoke rises from the...
I was asked for my date of birth. I told them January 8th, 1924. My real date of birth was September 17th, 1927.
Wreckage is strewn across great areas. Civilians immediately begin...
I told my mother and father I was sorry for lying about my age. I told them I could do more by helping the country fight the war. My mama and papa agreed to let me go. After I threatened to burn down the community store if they did not.
They didn't want people like me. Back when I was in, snipers weren't looked at like they're looked at now. We were kind of bastards. You know, we were necessary, but we were evil. And we were dirty. No one wanted to mess with snipers because it was kind of a dirty man's war.
Hey, we need to get some goddamn fucking fire across the road!
But I'll tell you what, when you're pinned down and no one else wants to stick their head up, well, you call your sniper and he takes care of your problems. I was stationed at Fort Covey, Panama, back in 1989. So I was there for all the ramp up to Operation Just Cause and all the follow-up missions for that, including the coup attempt against Noriega in October of 1989, which was my first exposure to rocket and heavy machine gun fire and not being able to do anything about it, which was exciting. And then from there, after the invasion was over, we spent most of our time running through parts of Central America, chasing the remnants of Noriega's army all through the jungles.
What can I say? I love you very much. I miss you, and I don't regret anything I've done. I've done some good things down here, some bad things down here, and whatever it was, I'm still your son, and I hope nothing's changed. But hopefully I'll see you in June, and once again, tell everyone I love them. Okay. All right, basically we started off down the Quarry Heights here, dismounted from trucks, and on foot walked down to 4th of July Avenue. There we started, taking a lot of fire there.
¡Eh, chico! ¡La usted! ¿Usted está acá afuera? Pues rampie para acá adentro. ¡Rampie para adentro! Tranquilo, tranquilo.
Guys, you got wounded here. You got a lot of civilians wounded. Can you understand me? Can you? You all right? It's hanging in there. You got a guy wounded right here, too. In the head. Arrántese para atrás.
Señor, no se mueva, no se mueva, no se mueva.
Watch my back. Okay, I gotta tell you straight, sir. It's gonna be rough. My bullet room. Exit. I can't see. Here. Shit. Move, give me some room. Go. All right, it's gonna hurt, baby.
Señora, con calmita.
It's okay, you're gonna live. Flesh wound.
Can you pull it?
I'm pushing it now.
Tranquila. Respira suave. Ahí, respira suave.
Down. Where's the bullet? Give her the bullet. Give me see. Bullet.
And then I went to the 82nd Airborne Division after that, Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and went straight to Saudi Arabia and Iraq.
Where we were at was in a really remote area. There's no infrastructure to it. There's no roads, plumbing, electricity, any of that shit. So we rarely got visited by anything above battalion level command. Our company was kind of on our own control of our FOB, and we had platoons out at secondary COPs, so we were much smaller little checkpoints. And so we were left to be pretty autonomous. And I think that autonomy and that freedom really forced us to go even closer together, because it's really just us there and whatever air support that we can get. Those people became my family, definitely. And when you're not on a mission, you're trapped back in a COP or a FOB with jack shit to do, but go to the gym, maybe make a phone call, or go to the chow hall, and we would do all of that together too.
I mean, you learn stuff about the local tradition. You don't shake with your left hand. You learn a couple of phrases in Pashto, was the dialect they were using in the area. I can't even remember what it was for stop. Like all the time, you'd be having convoys and people were like trying to cut into your convoys or something. But you always like trying to tell them stop, like, hey, get away from here. Because while we were there was a couple reports of VBIEDs in the area. VBIED stands for Vehicle-Borne Improvised Explosive Device. So, just a car that has a bunch of explosives in it, someone either in the car or outside the car, with the button. They usually ram the car into a convoy or into the main gate of a base and blow it up. And so, yeah, that would always kind of step everyone up on alert status. I want to say like, oh yeah, I was never scared or anything like that, but I guess it was just kind of not realizing the situation I was in. At any point in time, something could happen. And I think what led to that most was, I was just with a really good group of guys. Like I knew if something happened, like I would be taken care of. It wouldn't be an issue. So I think that let me not be so scared about things.
I had 11 and a half months of a 12-month deployment. I left a little bit early from deployment because on our last mission, I got hit by an enemy hand grenade, which did some damage to me and a couple of other soldiers. One was killed in that incident. So there, I was shipped out separately from my unit, went over to Germany for a little while and stayed in the hospital, and they did a couple of surgeries and fixed me up. And then they sent me back to New York and then over to Fort Campbell for more recovery. Then they ended up just retiring me out of the Army over a process that took like a year and a half.
I was very new to the infantry, what we call boot, someone that's new, inexperienced, stuff like that. And then when we deployed, they made me a team leader. And that was kind of, didn't sit well with a few of us. Here I was, my first combat deployment, no experience in a combat area, minimal training. And there's guys that have had several combat deployments and they weren't a team leader. Basically kind of fell down to politics. So-and-so didn't like them, so they didn't make him a team leader. I hadn't been there long enough to get in trouble, so they made me a team leader. And even though I was team leader, Newman was pretty much attached to my team as our DM. And I was like, Newman, if something's ever going on and I make a call and that's completely wrong, tell me, we'll change it. Because, I trusted his experience versus my book knowledge. So there was that. And then obviously when I got hit, they all came together.
Yes, it was definitely worth it. I mean, these people haven't seen freedom. I talked to a lot of the people on the streets after this was over. These people haven't seen freedom in 21 years. And, to see them dancing in the streets, literally dancing in the streets, and thanking every American they can see, and just, all the hate for Noriega I see out there, and all, the love for America, it made me feel like a soldier walking through France in the 40s. I mean, like we'd liberated these people from a great oppression. And there's no, in the matter of a few days, I went through the greatest terror I'd ever experienced to the biggest joy I'd ever experienced by seeing these people finally happy, And if I had to do it again, I wouldn't like it, but I would definitely do it again.
Hundreds of people I've talked to after that have come to me and said, I want to go in the military, or their parents send their kids to me. They used to send their kids to me to try and talk them out of going into the military. And I would say to them all the same thing. It's like, I could tell them the absolute worst parts about it, and they're going to do it anyway. Because there's nothing you can tell someone that hasn't experienced it, what they're in for until they actually experience it. And then it's too late. And I think what happens is people regret things that they did versus regretting the experience as a whole. Because the one positive thing about warfare is it does teach you volumes about yourself and about human nature and about human interaction and what's really important and what's not. Basically, the way I looked at it was I was surrounded by really, really, really wonderful people doing really hideous things. And it's the hideous things oftentimes that you have to learn to live with, not so much the experience as a whole. Nowadays, you have, it's different. When I was in, there wasn't really an ideological push to go in and do something to change the world. During those years, it was more because we all needed a job and something to do. Nowadays, you have this kind of battle of ideologies going on. So you have a lot of people who are finding the literal and physical battlefield as a way to kind of fight that stuff out in the real world, and it's pretty sad. But I think most of the guys that I've spoken to also that go over there with that kind of mentality don't come back with it. They go over there and see what I saw, which is an enemy who's not an enemy at all. They're just another human being trying to live through it like you are. And you get a lot of respect for that. I mean, personally, I have far more respect for the people I wasted over there than I do for most of the people I encounter back here in the United States.
I am Mary Heekin. I'm an LCSW. I am one of the partners in this practice. We treat all mood and anxiety disorders. It's a cognitive behavioral therapy practice. Post-traumatic stress disorder is something that occurs not to all people who experience a trauma. Those individuals who experience a trauma that is either where they feel like they are in harm's way or a near-death experience or someone close to them dies, they develop a continuum of symptoms that involve an array of symptoms. There's depression, there's fatigue, there's irritability, there's flashbacks, there's heightened vigilance, there's avoidance. It's a pretty large continuum of symptoms that interfere with their daily functioning. The most evidence-based treatment for PTSD is cognitive behavioral therapy. CBT includes different skills and strategies, including cognitive restructuring, behavioral strategies, breathing retraining, and exposure. Exposure therapy is basically introducing the individual to their memories or their thoughts or triggers in the environment or bodily sensations that remind them of the feared situation. Virtual reality is kind of an augmented exposure experience. It takes an individual into a three-dimensional, 360-degree environment, computer-generated environment that is it's immersive. It's done through a headset, but it takes them through a deeper form of exposure therapy by putting them back in the scenario that created the trauma in the first place. Depending upon where you are in the context of therapy, the beginning, the middle, or the end, basically you have to identify what's called the index trauma with individuals who meet criteria for PTSD. With combat veterans, it's a little tricky because they almost always have multiple traumas in one given tour. So it's not just one event that occurred. The index trauma is usually identified as the one that causes them the most trouble, the one that interferes with their functioning the most, or the one that haunts them the most, either through intrusive thoughts or nightmares, etc. So once that's established, we mimic as closely as possible, given the parameters of the VR environment. We try to mimic the story that they tell about their index trauma, and we put them in that scenario in the virtual reality environment, and we repeat the story over and over again until habituation occurs, which is ultimately symptoms go down, the severity of telling the story is less. And so in a session, they might stay in the virtual reality environment anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes until titration occurs. VR doesn't really address the community aspect of being in the military, but we did hear a lot from veterans that as soon as they returned home from a tour and they spent a few weeks here, many of them had a deep desire to go back and would sign up for multiple tours. Most of that had to do with the fact that they had started to feel more normal in a war zone than they did in what is hopefully a safe place, their neighborhood. They felt more uncomfortable in their own home than they did on their base.
pretty much as soon as we came back to the States, the States seemed like a much different place than I ever remembered. You know, like landing in Texas, you just, you know, when you're in Afghanistan for a year, you see a dude who weighs like $160, $170, and he's fucking fat. And you come back to, you know, I think we landed in Houston or something, and you're walking through the airport, and all of us are just like, oh my God, these people are fucking huge. And then just slowly getting used to the general American mentalities about everything, and the laziness, and, you know, just complaining about the smallest little unimportant things. Yeah, it was definitely pretty difficult. I didn't want to go back into the civilian world, for sure. It's all about safety, and everybody has to be so safe. And it's, you know, you learn over there that the world is not safe. The world is not a fair place. You know, fairness is a human concept. The world's actually a pretty damn brutal place. And so setting everything up for safety, I think we're giving up some of the, you know, the critical freedoms that we need to have for a little bit of safety. I don't know if that's necessarily the right thing to do. Personal responsibility. I think this is more of a cultural problem than anything. I think it's more people taking responsibility for their own safety and their own actions, and being aware of how they influence others around them. It's all about them. And it's just this selfish mentality that you see, where in the rest of the world, people really consider their neighbors and everybody around them, and what's going to happen, because they do feel like they are more part of something, that they're part of that tribe. So I think that we've kind of lost that here in the anonymity of America. And any one of those guys that I served with would have died for me, and I would have died for them. And, you know, if I needed anything, they would be there, you know, no matter what. And just those kinds of relationships don't seem to exist much over here. And I don't know, ever since I've gotten back, I've had a very hard time reconnecting with civilians. I just, you know, I kind of feel like a different species, I guess. So maybe some of it's my fault, but that's just kind of what I see. You know, we are all the same. And I really opened my eyes to that in Afghanistan, talking to some of our interpreters and some of the locals, and just listening to them. And they're people with hopes and dreams and aspirations and indoctrinations, and they're no different from who we are. And that's how all of us are. I don't know why it seems to be so separated.
Power outside the United States is really about whether or not you eat, or whether or not you live or die, or whether or not your family continues to procreate because of their ethnicity, or their, you know, the family name, where they came from, the religion, whatever. In the United States, we enjoy a certain level of freedom that allows us to complain about stuff that really drives a lot of combat veterans nuts, because it does seem unimportant. You know, you don't see the racial division on the battlefield the way you do when you're not on the battlefield. And to a lot of people, I think that things like that just don't make any sense. You know, that's not what we fought for, so to speak. And then you come back and realize that you didn't fight for any of that. It didn't even exist. So there's some regret in that. If you learn the big picture, if you learn who is behind the curtain, you know, who's pulling the chains and the levers and things like that, sometimes you can learn to regret it. There was times I went through a period when I learned about, you know, kind of the big money involved in some of the operations I was in, and, you know, and it pisses you off. But ultimately you go back to the guys, you know, that you knew and fought with and lived and, you know, died with, and who gives a shit, you know? Wasn't about money to me.
I got blown up November 25th, 2013, and I separated April 29th, 2015. So, yeah, just around 2 years. I guess the only thing that I didn't like about, you know, the civilian world is just kind of how people treat one another, you know. In the Marine Corps, in the military in general, I would assume, you know, you've got someone there. You know, you need something, someone there is going to help you, you know. People aren't completely selfish, you know. If you need help with something, someone's going to help you out. You need, you know, someone to talk to. Someone's there to talk to. in the civilian world, you don't get that a lot. I feel like people that have actually truly struggled with something, you know, people worried, what was it? Facebook was shut down the other morning for whatever reason. People would lose their minds over Facebook. Like, in big picture, that's not something that matters. And I feel like people get caught up in stupid stuff like that. And, you know, guys that have, not just guys, girls, obviously, you know, that have seen true struggle, not even, or experienced a true struggle themselves, they just kind of understand, like, hey, there's a bigger picture here. There's more stuff, there's more important stuff to be worried about versus what Kim Kardashian did yesterday.
As crazy as it sounds, probably the most important lesson that I learned, or most powerful lesson I learned out of warfare, was compassion and humanity. Because when people are at their worst, you have the best opportunities to see them do amazing things. And oftentimes those amazing things are for another human being, you know, and that's exactly that's how you survive. No one survives combat by themselves. It's a very individual struggle, sure, but you've got people usually around you that are there to help you and protect you, and it just happens. You become one big organism, you know. And for me, someone who grew up with not a lot of close ties to people, when I got into the military, I became a sniper. It was, you know, I still didn't have a lot of close ties. I was out on missions a lot on my own. But the times when I was in a battle, a firefight with a whole bunch of different people on my side, that's the times I learned that I do belong. I do kind of matter. You know, and then you come back and you're put back into a little scenario where you don't matter anymore. You know, there's no battle back home.
The sky was dark with airplanes and the sea was dotted with ships in every direction. It looked as if the whole world was there. The beach could now be seen some distance away. Trash in the water indicated that the main forces had landed only hours earlier. It meant that the fighting was just ahead. As we moved inland, the few words Kilroy was here and gone were written everywhere. The smell of death clouded the air. Blaring guns filled our ears. My squad was assigned guard duty the first night in France.
It's all about how do you address fear? How do you address fear? Fear of wanting to be accepted, of wanting to like not have people look at you as being weak, of not having people look at you as being crazy, you know. That was you know, one of those first moments that I saw with my dad, that as I started telling this story, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna expose like all of his craziness, or the things that we call, you know, whatever it was that he did that might not have been so, I guess, loving sometimes that you would think, or out of not in the norm. Some of that, you know, was, you know, like him having the nightmares, jumping up in the middle of the night, you know, attacking, you know, he never attacked me, but attacking other siblings in my family or whatever on various occasions, thinking that it was somebody else, but not really wanting to. I remember one of the things that I remember with him was with me that he got so mad at me one time that he just kept on yelling at me to like get away from him, because he told me that he was so afraid that he just kept on saying, you don't know, you don't know, you don't know. I think he felt that he had the potential to kill me, and he knew that he loved me, but he didn't want to kill me.
As soon as I would go to sleep, I would just go right back there. And I was just reliving these experiences over and over again. So you'd wake up in the morning like you were just there. I mean, you still got all of that adrenaline pumping. You're still in fight or flight mode. And then you got to get up and go to work. And it's not easy. And I was on some hardcore sleep meds too. And they wouldn't do the trick. Either it would be a nightmare that would wake me up, or something in my ambient environment, like a dog would bark outside or house would creak or something like that. Just some sort of noise would just bring me right back out of sleep. And like I just learned to be a very light sleeper, I guess. Combined, I might get 2 hours of sleep a night, spread out over the whole night. This, especially the next day, if you had something to do, just to try to come down from that level of adrenaline and anxiety, and put on a game face and go just interact with regular civilians without looking like a fucking freak. It's hard to do. It takes a lot.
I was having flashbacks at the Fayetteville Mall, and I sought help in the Army. I sought help. I went on sick call and said, look, I don't think I'm okay. I'm not sleeping. I'm real jittery. I'm armed. Everywhere I go, is this normal? And the guy told me, we don't know what's wrong with you, but we suggest you never mention it to anybody else because it'll ruin your career, and get back to your unit. So I did. And a few days later, I decided that I needed to be the hell out of the Army. So I bribed a PFC with a case of beer, and he got me out of the Army by the end of the month. They called it an educational drop, so I could go back to college. I did, man. I went back to college with a vengeance, and I cleaned up, man. I was on the dean's list, honor roll every single semester I was in. Graduated magna cum laude, got a master's degree after that, got a doctorate after that. And that shit was easy. Compared to war, school is just easy. Easy. I counseled combat veterans, people with trauma, ran a bunch of clinics, did the whole medical field thing. I think I explained it before with PTSD. Oftentimes, your level of threat awareness is way up here, but the level of threat is down here. So instead of bringing yourself down to where the threat actually exists, you'll figure out a way, unconsciously or not, to bring that threat up to where you feel justified being at a certain level of awareness. So I think that the more, as more time passed, and I got to kind of understand that I was different than other people, being, a psychologist, I would kind of test it once in a while. I would go out, and I like to charm people up. So I'm at this one store, and I was buying clothes, and the young lady that was ringing me up, she was a young girl, about 19, 20 years old. So I'm trying to make jokes, I think I'm being funny, and man, she's just not laughing. Her expression is completely serious. So I finish one of my stupid remarks, and I say, nothing, and she looks up at me, she says, sir, were you trying to make a joke? And I said, well, yeah. She goes, She goes, have you thought about including a gesture? And I said, a gesture? What do you mean? She goes, something physical so they know you're telling a joke, like. And I just burst out laughing. I thought that was the funniest damn thing I'd ever heard. But it made a lot of sense. I mean, she did not speak my language anymore. And I think that's exactly what we're seeing is when you get involved with a certain level of trauma, your ability to speak and communicate with other people becomes skewed. You may think you're coming off completely fine and completely okay, and the person on the other end is seeing you as absolutely intense and over the top. And that starts a feedback loop, which of course, once again, rarely de-escalates, but more oftentimes escalates, which is why we're seeing so many unfortunate suicides and altercations between armed veterans and police officers that end poorly.
We had a guy in our unit. He had plans for the future. He just got married. There was talk of a kid. He was in the process of writing a book. And then all of a sudden, we had a little post on Facebook. Hey guys, I'm just done fighting this fight. It's nobody's fault, but I'm out of his. So, you got people calling the cops in that area. You got people actually driving out to this guy. You got people calling his family. Long story short, he committed suicide. And even, he had these things to look forward to, and for some people, it's just not enough. I'm a huge believer in you can't save someone that doesn't want to be saved, regardless of whatever the situation is. If they don't want out of it, there's nothing you can do. With that being said, just being there for someone, being there, if they need to talk, if they need to go out, just go out, grab some food, walk around a little bit, maybe go do something fun. Just being there is probably the best thing, and staying active in someone's life. What happens is you stop checking in with people. They kind of, like I said earlier, it's not they forget about you, they get caught up in the here and the now, and you just kind of drift. And then, for you, that may be an okay, you may have that support system that makes that okay, but they may not. And then, you hear stuff all the time. They get out, they end up getting a divorce, they end up losing their job, they end up in debt, and it's just little things piling on top of each other. And I feel when that happens, they've already lost that connection with people. They don't want to open it up and be like, hey, I need help. There's kind of this stigma, if you ask for help, you're weak. I don't think that's true. Some people abuse it, some people don't use it enough.
I joined the Emory Trauma Anxiety Recovery Program. They were trying to develop, with returning OEF and OIF combat veterans, they were trying to develop treatments that military personnel would actually engage in. Military personnel don't often want to get treatment. They are trained to be tough. They are trained to be brave, and getting treatment creates a lot of stigma for veterans. So we were trying to address PTSD with something that they would do and something that was effective in a brief format. Using the VR technology, because this generation, and it kind of speaks to a gaming generation in a way, it was of interest to them. We did a lot of our work through the Veterans Administration. So we worked with their personnel, we worked with their doctors, we worked with people they trusted. They were referred to us by people who they had a connection with. So they didn't feel like we were just some random people trying to help them. But it did involve trying to gain their trust, trying to learn how to speak a language that they could feel safe with. We did a lot of work interpersonally, just trying to understand the mind of a returning combat veteran and the amount of avoidance and fear they had, but also combined with this deep desire to be brave, not seek help, not need help. I understand that there is a stigma involved with kind of raising your hand and saying, I have a mental health issue. I work very hard to decrease stigma. I think that it has, in some ways, decreased over time. I think more people are talking about it. I think it's more socially acceptable to talk about it amongst friends. But there's no doubt stigma still exists.
I used to run free groups every Friday for 3 hours. Anybody could come. Just tons of people would file through those. People from World War II and Korea and Dominican Republic and Grenada, and people who had fought in Beirut, Lebanon. People obviously from the most recent conflicts in Vietnam. And all of these stories shared a lot in common. People fight, people kill, people die. But the person's experience with that fighting, killing, and dying was very much based on their own experience and their own ethnicity and their own culture and their own religion and their own kind of way of formulating their worldview. And if you're not honoring that in your treatment approach, then you're missing out on something very important, which is the patient has the cure, you do not. And I think that's where a lot of providers go wrong, is it's them in the room. So how many people did I see? None. How many people did I experience seeing me? Thousands. and their families. And that's where we really need to make in my opinion, make the difference is, no one's dealing with these people more than their families are. And the families don't understand what's happening. They just know that Joe or Jane went off to war. They came home, they're a completely different person. Now the children have to deal with that. The spouses have to deal with that. Their communities, their neighbors have to deal with that. Oftentimes they're uprooted and sent to another duty station. There's a lot going on there. And if we're not focusing on what that family needs, we're not creating an atmosphere of support around that veteran to where they can, focus on getting better. Know your audience more than anything. And I think that's where we're running into a problem. We have a bunch of people, who don't understand the military. They've never been exposed to the military. They don't like what the military does. Who the hell does? But they've got this thing like, thank you for your service. That's the thing, which is nice. At least it's something. At least it's not fuck you for your service. But what are you supposed to respond to? Or how are you supposed to respond to someone who's just thank you for your service? Especially if you've done things that you don't like or you're not proud of. Well, I have my new response, of course, is simple. Oh, you're welcome. Now don't fuck it up. It doesn't go over very well, though, because they don't think that I'm joking.
Stop saying thank you for your service. I always hated that. It bugged the shit out of me. I want to come back. I want to be a useful member of society again. I don't want to be that, weird, crazy outsider that, everybody is kind of scared of. I want to be brought back in. I want to feel useful and feel like I contributed.
First of all, I think it's important to distinguish clinically the difference between what's called intrusive thoughts and flashbacks. So intrusive thoughts are when you think about traumatic experiences that have happened to you and you don't want to think about them. Whatever you do, you cannot stop thinking about them. And those are very real thoughts. A flashback is where you are physically experiencing the trauma. Your body and your brain feel they are back in Iraq in that foxhole or being raped or whatever what your trauma was. Now, how that relates to coming home, if you're having a flashback, you're going to look pretty crazy to the people around you, and oftentimes they're not going to know how to deal with that. Here's a great example. A guy has a flashback, backs himself into a corner, into a fighting position. He's obviously thinking he's under attack. Okay, he's in a corner. All threats are going to come from in front of him. So most people, if they weren't thinking, would approach that person. They're going to be one of those threats. However, the smart thing to do if you're thinking is to turn your back to that patient and back up to that patient and be on their side. So what they're going to see is you in front of them going, okay, everything's cool. So you're now part of the solution versus part of the problem. It's a basic difference, and I think I've said this before, it's a basic difference between saying, hey, what's the problem, versus, hey, how can I help? I would respond to someone saying, how can I help, much better than someone saying, hey, what's your problem? I know I've got a problem. I don't need you telling me I've got a problem. There's not enough help. There's not enough help for the people who need it. The veteran system is clogged up with, in my opinion, a number of people who don't really need to be there. They're maybe using up resources that others could use. And the other problem is that I found out recently as I've returned to that system is they're very limited in what they can, what services they can give you. And that's all based on metrics. If they can't prove that something has worked, then they won't be able to offer it to you. So they're getting back into this kind of cookie cutter approach to mental health care, which is unfortunate. And I don't think it's going to work. Our veterans need something different. Our veterans need a more personalized treatment approach, and that's not happening. It can't happen within that type of bureaucracy. They're not set up for it. It's not controllable. And that's what they want. They want controlled outcomes, when in reality, and you're dealing with PTSD, every case is very unique. I never saw two alike, ever. I never saw two respond the same to any treatment technique or difference in treatment technique that I attempted. I mean, you had to do a very individualized treatment plan. You had to do extremely good case formulation, and there's just no time. They have to get you in. They're cataloging people. But I do have a cure. I have the absolute cure for combat-related PTSD. Stop sending our men and women to war, and you won't have to deal with it anymore.
On the third day in France, a German V-2 rocket hit the ammunition dump and started monstrous fires. Men were going in all directions and smoke obscured the sky. I was lost from my outfit. As I moved along the road, I became worried, not knowing how far I'd wandered off from my outfit. It began to get dark. The area coming out was an area where fighting was going on. I crawled into a ditch on the alert for snipers. I finally got back to my company.
I just kind of remember my dad, him being just really one of the like nicest, loving people, but also just like one of the a person that was kind of like that dealt with a lot of fear, you know, that had fear that he was going to lose his wife, fear that he was going to lose his children, fear that there was just a lot of fear with him. And I know that, you know, I remember seeing him have like nightmares and jumping up in the middle of the night, and I know also how that made me feel as well, you know, as like a little kid, where you look at your father and you want your father to be like your protector, somebody who's going to be there for you, somebody who's going to just make certain that you're okay. And then all of a sudden you see them scared, and so as a little kid, it puts fear in you, and so I think that every single one of my siblings, like we all kind of in some way, shape, or form have some sort of, you know, have dealt with fear in some way, shape, or form, whether it be through depression or whether, because that's what that's what it is. I mean, you know, in most cases, I think.
I've seen some people come back, and you know, and they're having conversations with me like you and I are speaking right now. I did have a dream where one of the guys I killed came back, and he kept following me around everywhere and saying, "There ain't no coming back from dead. There ain't no coming back from dead. There ain't no coming back from dead." That's all he would say, no matter what I was doing. It was very kind of blasé and normal. But, you know, being in college, when I first got back, being in college, I remember seeing like Troy's ghost in crowds and things like that, you know, and mangled up the way they were when I saw them last. And that was hard. That was really hard. I mean, I thought it was absolutely fucking crazy. That's, you know, that's when I started drinking a lot and using a lot of drugs, was because I just didn't want to deal with that anymore and seeing it. But I found that the more I drank and the more I tried to escape with pharmaceuticals, is the more I had problems with things like that. And I ended up, you know, in counseling myself. But war changes you, man. It changes you. If you never believed in ghosts before, you will after you go to combat. If you never believed in God before, you will after you go to combat. I mean, it changes everything about you, the way you eat, sleep, breathe, shit, fuck. Troy was, Troy Coates, or Vance Coates, he was a young man that was killed in Panama, feet from me. He was one of my kids, or one of my troops, until a few days before the operation. And I had to give him to another unit, or to another platoon. And then he was killed while he was sitting in a room with the platoon sergeant and some others. Him and Michael DeBlois were killed in the same room by what appears to be a rocket strike. And then a whole bunch of other people were wounded.
I had a really good friend named Moffat. He was a replacement to the unit who got sent to us about 2 weeks before we deployed. He'd just come from Korea. I don't know, we hit it off really quick. He was just one of the nicest all-around guys I'd ever met. And so when we got to Afghanistan, we grabbed a room together and we bunked together.
So we were on a human terrain mapping patrol, just kind of, hey, how are we doing in the area? Is there anything you need from us? Anything we could do to, better the situation? You want to tell us where the enemy is? You want to tell us where the IEDs are? Stuff like that. So we were on our way back to base. I think we were about to click out from base. And that's when my Vic 1, we hit an IED with our mine roller.
But it was gruesome, dude. It was, I was shooting into this building. So I was on the second floor of this apartment complex on the landing. And so when the room blew up, it was like right in front of me, about 10 feet to my right front, and then underneath me. So just people started pouring out of this room, all fucked up and bleeding and pieces missing. And the ones that couldn't walk out on their own, they're being drug out or whatever. And man, I see that shit every single night when I go to sleep. Every single night I dream about that without fail. And that happened 30 years ago. And I still see it I can smell it. I can feel the heat of that explosion. I can hear them crying. That's fucking PTSD, dude. That's fucking PTSD.
And we were part of a grenadier squad, which they later turned into a gunnery squad. They gave us one of the new Mark 48s, which is a badass gun, by the way. And we were supposed to gun that. And during an ambush, a couple of us got pinned down behind a little car. We were in this town, and Moffat just stood up. This is a pretty big firefight. There must have been at least 24 insurgents on the other side, and then there was just a squad of us. There was 12 of us, and we were kind of pinned down in this one little clot, and a couple of cars and some mud brick walls that we were using for cover. And Moffat saw the dudes that had pinned the guys behind the far car, and he just stood up with his Mark 48 and just started laying down rounds. And he paid the price for it. Somebody hit him in the face. And he died out there.
Standard operating procedure then was to take up security positions and call out EOD, explosive ordnance disposal, and have them come check out for secondaries and tertiaries. And then there was a compound not too far from us, maybe 100 meters from my Vic. They wanted someone on the ground with them to go into the compound to go look for more IEDs. They relayed that information to my lieutenant. Lieutenant relayed that to the squad leader. He's like, hey, Schubert, send someone out to, go be security. I kind of argued with him for a little bit about it. I was like, hey, that's kind of stupid. We've already found a couple IEDs. We've got 50 cals. Like, if we've got security, we don't need to put more feet out there on the ground. So he's like, I know you're right, but we got to do this. All right, so I'm not sending any of my guys. I'll be back in a little bit. And that's when I stepped out the truck. I met one EOD guy out of the back of my truck. He led me like this, and so you always follow in their trace, right? Try to step in their footsteps, but you also want to leave a gap in case someone does step on one. So I left about a 15-foot gap, and he got to a point and stopped, and I came up behind him and stopped, and he said, just wait here for this other guy to pass, and you're gonna follow in his trace. And so he went off to go look for more IDs over here. Second EOD guy wrapped this way. Again, let him get 15 feet roughly. And that's when I stepped into his trace. All of a sudden there's like cloud of dust and everything. And then all of a sudden I know I'm in the air, like doing a backflip. I think I did 2 or 3. And then there's like the still frame of me like hitting the ground on my back. And that's kind of like where video picks up. So it got me and it got the second EOD guy. After I landed, I could hear him screaming and stuff. I quickly assessed myself, realized initially I was just above the ankle on my right foot, was blown off, and then my left one looked pretty fucked up. And I could hear him scream, but I couldn't see him because the angle I was at. Because I remember saying, "Get the fuck up." Because what happens a lot of times is they'll plant IEDs and then you'll hit IEDs and then they'll ambush you while everyone's trying to, figure out the chaos, figure out what's going on. So I was like, that's what's about to happen. We're about to get hit. There's about to be more guys. I tried to sit up, take care of myself. That's when that first EOD guy tackled me. I don't even think it was maybe 3 minutes tops before our corpsman, Newman, I want to say Linton was there also, and one other guy, they showed up. I honestly didn't expect them to get there that quick because, this was essentially a minefield and they just ran through it. They started helping Doc, Doc took over medical treatment. They called up the 9 line, that's what you call up to higher, saying, hey, we need a medevac for this personnel. Got on a bird. Docs are doing their thing. They're tourniqueting, they're getting blood going, they're getting IV bags set up. I was laying there and they're like, hey, is anything else messed up? I was like, how are my balls? And he's like, hang on. Checked. He's like, they're good. I'm like, all right, then I'm set. Right? Got to our base there at Leatherneck, got into surgery. And then I woke up, I want to say the next day or 2 days later, maybe, to my first sergeant and some of the higher ups for my unit. A mix of, I'm sorry's and, you did good and blah, 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 stuff like that. Kind of, I say normal, as if like everyone knows what I'm talking about. It's just some people, they kind of take things personally like that. Some leaders, because, technically their job is to get the mission done, but also take care of their guys. And in the Marine Corps, mission's always first, take care of the mission, regardless of what it may cost. But some leaders do take that kind of stuff to heart when someone gets hurt under their command. There was like, sorry this happened to you. Sorry, like that was a bad call on my part. Sorry for this, sorry for that. And then, there's no point being sorry about it. Shit happens all the time. So just take it, roll with it, learn to live with it. While I was in the Marine Corps, it was something to do. Get off work, 4 or 5 o'clock. It's kind of, you didn't want to go off base and go do something, or you didn't want to just sit around your room, so you go to the gym. It's just something to do. And then after I got injured, it was kind of my escape. I'd wake up, I go to physical therapy, I go to occupational therapy, I knock out any other medical appointments I had, and then it started out as something to do. I wasn't well enough to be like going outside of base, or at least not easily go outside of base. Spent a lot of time in the gym, and I got more and more focused on it, like trying to break my personal records, stuff like that, and just kind of see how far I could push it. There's just something about, putting in headphones, listening to some music that you like, and just lifting heavy things. If you need that second to think about something, that's a good time to think about it. If you just want to relax, it's a good way to blow off some steam. Typically people, everyone deals with stress and all that stuff in their own way. Some people negative, some people positive, some people, they sit down, they watch a TV show, they watch a movie, they make some food, or, they go drinking, drugs, gym was kind of my stress relief.
You got to get your shit together. And it's hard. It's hard to get your shit together on your own. And it's even more difficult at times to get your shit together when you're around a bunch of other people of your group or tribe that don't have their shit together either. That's why I had to get away from, sitting at the, post whatever, talking about war stories. That's not helpful for me. And then having a good fucking plan. The 4 parts of life, that you have to get your shit together. You have to get these 4 parts of your life together. One is physical activity. You have to get up and start moving. Whether it's exercise or just getting out into your environment, you must move. 2, you have to focus on something spiritual, whether it's God or, Allah or whatever it is. You have to be spiritual. You have to focus on your nutrition because we're putting garbage and poison into our bodies, and you have to get your sleep under control. And part of getting your sleep under control is realizing sometimes that you don't need as much sleep as you think you do. That's a myth. But if you can start feeling better about yourself, regardless of what you've done in the past, then you can maybe start making some type of a difference in the future, positive difference in the future. For me, I focus on a number of different things. I've found a lot of help through yoga. I do have a lot of physical pain because of the stuff I went through in the military, and yoga has helped me have a lot more mobility and a lot less pain. I garden a lot. I love gardening. I live a very, very isolated and solitary life. And to me, to see the beauty of those flowers and plants as they, as you're kind of nurturing them from seedlings into bloom, is beautiful. And I'm blessed to live in a place where I can have a lot of flora and fauna around me and see the world the way it was supposed to be seen instead of inside a little box, and going mad inside of an office cubicle. So, having a herd or a support network is important, or a tribe. That's super important, something I've had a very difficult time with. I have a tendency to kind of push people away with my issues. And I'll be honest, there was a reason I became a sniper. I kind of like to be alone, and that tends to not go well in relationships. I think the biggest problem with our troops returning from overseas right now is the culture they're returning to. They say that the veterans are the ones with the adjustment problem. I have a tendency to disagree. I think it's our culture that has the adjustment problem. And part of it is because they really do have this expectation that we're all going to come back and be, some crazy, cooped out, psycho who sits in a cave and waits for people to come, with in full kit, and thinking the war's not over. That's not it at all. I think we're missing a really, really huge opportunity to take these people who've been through terrible experiences and learn from them. That's how we prevent future wars, is by listening to the people talk about the horrors that they went through. We need that. We need to be inspired by those stories and not just shame these people. We need to create a better environment, an environment of appreciation, of real appreciation, genuine appreciation, and not this, okay, I can get 10% off at Home Depot, whatever the hell it is that week. Okay, that's nice, but man, I don't think that's what anybody wants. They don't want medals, they don't want public attention. They just want a little tiny bit of understanding.
Making the world a better place starts with small things. It starts with talking to each other. It starts with getting help when you need it. It's hard to think globally. I can only think in small steps.
Find a group of buddies, stay with them. Stay in contact with friends and groups of like-minded people, whether it's people you can get together like this and come out and just plink a few rounds. I I got to tell you, after coming back from war, you have a much different sense of humor and a much different outlook on life. And so when you're talking to another veteran who's also been there, it's very easy to just kind of be yourself and be talking about that stuff. And I don't know. The Army's really good in a lot of ways because you do get that sense of community. It's going to get a good work ethic into you. It's going to teach you how to work out and to be disciplined and follow a chain of command. And those are all good things. But you got to think about, the conflicts that we're fighting right now, and do you really want to be a part of those? Because I think it's up to individual Americans to say that, this is bullshit. We shouldn't be doing this.
Get the fuck up. That's kind of a motto that I live by. Like I said, it's what I said when I got blown up before the EOD guy tackled me. Because, I was preparing for this ambush. I was preparing, hoping like that EOD, like I said, I thought that EOD guy stepped on it. So I was like, I've got to go take care of him, or I've got to go do this, or I got to get ready for this ambush, or I've got to get my guys ready for something, get something done. So get the fuck up. So I got this tattooed on my leg just before I got out of the Marine Corps. And, it's a nice reminder because, every morning you get up, I go to put on my prosthetic and it's right there. And I'm like, hey, I'm still here. There's still stuff I can do. Get up, get the fuck up, get it done. Don't sit around and feel sorry about yourself. It's not gonna help anything. Just like I said with the stressing, worrying about shit you can't control, it's not gonna help anything. So just get up and do what you can.
The last thing to be done, to leave my very close buddies behind. No one in the Jeep had anything to say. The thoughts were just those of let's get out of here, the faster the better. Home was now the objective.
I don't think we are going to save the world for a number of different reasons. One, my generation's too fucked up to save the world. And I don't think the world needs to be saved. I think we just need to stop focusing on all the bad stuff that's out there and realize that that's a learned behavior. To focus on the bad things that are out there, the terror and the horror and the fear, is based on fear. It's not based on wonder and exploration. If we can create an environment in our world where people are more likely to explore their world versus destroy it, there you go. It's just an attitude shift. And I think warfare does that. When you see people lose everything they have, but they still retain their humanity, that's a badass lesson. That's a lesson that gives you hope and, maybe an idea that we're going to be around in another 100 years. Maybe not.
Beyond the shore, we'll kiss just as before.
On a Saturday afternoon, I arrived in the town where I started better than 3 years ago. I had only one concern. I never found out who Kilroy was.
Anything else that you want to say?
Fuck no. I don't know. What did we miss?
We got everything that I was looking for.
Right on. I think it's a wrap.
All right, sounds good.